It's Jerningam here. I mean, for some people probably won't mind these chimneys getting destroyed in the UK, but things move on in life. But for me, I like history. I like kind of old things, and the chimneys what we're looking at today on this video are on the Sun newspaper in the UK. That it kind of annoys me because I like things like this, and they're destroying the history. I mean, things have to move on eventually. I mean, the coal mines have been closed for years and years. Then you get something like this getting blown up. It's kind of annoying, in my opinion. But tell me what you guys think. I mean, look at all that history gone. You know, where we're going to get our energy from and fuel and stuff, and see how quick it was when they blew them up. I mean, everyone thinks differently about this, and I'm sure you guys would think the same. Why would they blow them up? But there must be some kind of reason why they've just done that. And like I say, there's still restrictions of movement in India. Um, like I say, there's tensions there still. I have been doing a lot of these news videos. I mean, I'm still going to live stream later, but I've been doing more videos like this. So I'm still here, guys. Don't worry about that. Indian oil, see? Stop for Kadesh, please. There's the army. The world we live in, guys, it can't be more realer than it is, if that makes any sense. Um, it's just irritating that sometimes they do things in the world and they destroy history. What it's been there, history's been there for a while. I mean, everybody likes history because without history in this world, the world wouldn't be like it is today. Um, so basically, just trying to find which other videos I can actually show on the matter. I mean, there's loads of videos on YouTube, but some of them are pre-recorded, some of them are done months ago, some of them are done weeks ago. But right, there's some news about the New Zealand police hunt gunman in Australia killed.
At approximately 8 a.m. this morning, police located this van with the man's body inside. The offender is still outstanding. The victim is believed to be an Australian national. We are working to notify his next of kin, and I cannot confirm his identity at this stage. This is a tragic incident. Inquiries indicate that this was a random attack. It is understandable and concerning to have an armed offender outstanding, but I want to reassure the public we are working hard to identify and locate the offender. It is our absolute priority.
Granada News. Every time you just seem to think about things, and things are just. You think a lot about things in your brain, if that makes any sense. Just. Wild weather has snapped. Sometimes you get tsunamis and whirlwinds in the country and other things. This is probably like 1 week ago, this video, but I'm bringing it up to light of awareness that there is whirlwinds and there is heavy storms and water in the world. It's quite dangerous, really, but Certainly makes the place look different when it's snowy. Different scenery and various things. I mean, what are we doing in this world, really? I mean, some of us are destroying things in the world, destroying history, and you know, we're gonna move on to the Brexit again. Lots of people have heard about Brexit, the European Union leaving the UK. CBIC's smash hit Independence Day offer is back by. I'm sorry if I'm talking a bit too fast again.
The government appears to have conceded for the first time that the Prime Minister cannot prorogue Parliament in order to force through a no-deal Brexit. In response to a legal letter from the businesswoman and anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller, the government's lawyers say Parliament won't be prevented from sitting in the period leading up to the UK's exit on October the 31st. And Ms Miller, who took the government to court and won the right for Parliament to trigger Article 50, reassembled her legal team last month with instructions to stop Boris Johnson shutting down Parliament and forcing through a no-deal Brexit against MPs' wishes. Well, Gina Miller is here. Good morning. Nice to see you. Look, I've read through this response. There's a lot of legalese in there. Break it down for us. What exactly are they saying to you?
Well, what they've said is unequivocally they accept that to close down Parliament, to bypass them in terms of Brexit, or stopping a no-deal Brexit in particular, is illegal. So without having to go to court, they've conceded. We've basically called their bluff.
So they're saying, in effect, that there are rules in place where they have to meet for a certain amount of time before October the 31st.
Yes, the MPs passed this Northern Ireland Executive Act. And under Section 3 of that, the MPs will have 3 occasions of several days at a time between the 4th of September and the 31st of October. And the government, as I said, has given me huge amount of reassurances and has gone to great lengths to say, yes, we absolutely agree that the MPs will have that opportunity. So it's a lot of bluster what they're saying, that MPs will be denied that opportunity.
So proroguing of the Commons will not happen, but the Prime Minister's heading to Germany and France this week, where he's going to say, amongst other things, no deal cannot be stopped if that is the only option. Is that actually true then?
Well, whilst they've given this reassurance of no prorogation of Parliament, one of the central tenets of my legal letter to the Prime Minister was to say that if you deny MPs the ability to pass legislation to stop no deal, that would be contrary to Parliament's sovereignty. So we will be going back again to seek that reassurance, amongst others, that they will allow Parliament to pass legislation to stop no deal.
But it still leaves a very big question mark, doesn't it? And there are lots of people coming forward. We talk to them all the time saying, you know, this cannot happen. Parliament will not allow it to happen. But what you're effectively saying is, ultimately, it could happen, and there's nothing anyone could actually do to stop it.
Well, at the moment, Parliament has to find a way, instruments and ways of ensuring that they can pass up legislation, scrutinising, which is what the government letter has confirmed, that Parliament will be able to scrutinise and examine all options when it comes to exiting, is not the same as giving them the ability to pass legislation. And because we already have in legislation that the 31st of October is our exit day, they need to pass other legislation to prevent no deal or to change that date after an extension. So forgetting about, who's going to be king of
Yeah, but they don't need to keep doing extensions. We had to wait an extra 6 bloody months, most of us, for extension of it,
really
of the Brexit thing.
Ensuring that they have that opportunity, and we will go back to make sure that the MPs are given that opportunity via further legal assurances. But prorogation is off the table.
Right. But so in all of this, though, because you've studied this more than most of us, the parliamentary arithmetic and the fact and the time scale involved and the fact that they're all on holiday at the minute, in effect, means that change of legislation, primary legislation, is very unlikely to happen.
I don't believe that at all, because actually you really have to question why the conference season, for example, the Parliament is rising for those 3 weeks. We still have an opportunity where Parliament could be brought back and has to sit. And it doesn't take long, actually, if you could do it within 24 hours. So the fact is, MPs need to find the tool to do that. And if they choose to do so, to be prevented by the Prime Minister from passing legislation, we feel would be illegal, not least based on the judgment in my first case.
So
it's not illegal to shut Parliament, to just leave with a deal of the EU.
You to take if you wanted to pursue it further.
Oh, we will be pursuing it further. We will go back.
People are sick of getting it backdated all the while. That's why they're doing it.
Seeking further reassurances, but in particular, the assurance that MPs will have the opportunity to bring legislation if they wish to do so.
And the last time you were on this programme, the Home Secretary appeared not long afterwards and said, look, it's not acceptable to use the courts to tie the hands of MPs. I mean, aren't you, in effect, looking for legal loopholes to stop these people who have been elected into office doing their job?
But that is the point. It is ensuring elected MPs have the opportunity to do their job and protecting parliamentary sovereignty, which is what my first case is about. And this is exactly the same, in that a Prime Minister is not above the law. And actually, this is what they've agreed in the letter, that Boris Johnson is not above the law, which is great to hear, and that they can't bypass Parliament. And we just need to make sure that parliamentarians have the opportunity to be sovereign.
And yet, in terms of being sovereign, Parliament was sovereign, wasn't it, when it agreed the extension and the exit date of the 31st. Some would argue that they've made that decision. The democratic process within Parliament has happened. That decision's been made. Now it needs to be stuck to.
Well, Parliament doesn't just happen in one day. It's an ongoing process. And more than ever, you see today the Yellowhammer document. You know, when you now see what we're facing when it comes to no deal, then parliamentarians are expressing their view, and that's why we elect them, to protect us, and that's what they're going to try and do, protect us from this disastrous no deal.
Well, I mean, you've been accused, and to be fair, lots of people who want to either remain or stop a no deal have been accused of scaremongering, Project Fear.
I don't think you can say that now. Now you've got the government's own paper.
Well, no, but I was going to say, in relation to Yellowhammer, this document, this leaked cabinet document that says, you know, there may be, but prepare for shortages of food, fuel and medicines. The government says, well, that's looking at a worst case scenario. That's planning for the worst. They don't expect any of that to happen.
That's not what the report says. And actually, it even now has changed from the original report and now says that there is likely to be a hard border in Ireland. So it also says things that there are no bilateral agreements with any of our member states, the fact that our chemicals for our waters actually can't be stockpiled, that 3/4 of our medicines come from the EU. These are not scaremongering stories. This is the government's own assessment. And if you then add that to the Bank of England's assessment, the Office of Budget Responsibilities assessment, you know, how much more torrents of assessments do you need to realise that this is putting people's lives in danger?
One thing the Prime Minister has made it very clear about is the idea that he wants a new deal. I mean, in effect, he's going to the EU and say, give us a free trade deal, or we're going to leave anyway. Now, the more you do to rule out the possibility through legal means, and the more that MPs do in the House of Commons to rule out the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, you just undermine his position, don't you, in trying to actually get the sort of deal which he thinks will be good for this country?
No, because they're two different things. One is leaving in a way that is, if we do leave, that it's not no deal. And then the second part, which is the difficult bit we haven't even started, is negotiating the future relationship. And that, so the two things, mixing them up, is actually not how the process works. So they are two completely separate things. One is leaving, and the other is actually then negotiating over, if we were to get a deal, over the next 2 years or so, or however long it takes to get that future relationship.
But he has said he wants a deal. And by taking no deal off the table, that does weaken his hand, doesn't it? They can just turn around and say, you've got a deal, and we're not going to change it, which is all they've said so far.
Well, yes, and I don't know who exactly he's negotiating with, because there's nobody sitting in the Commission till November. So the idea that there's a lot of bluster and propaganda going on here. And from our point of view, we've just taken one off the table. They've agreed with us. Prorogation is not a tool that they can use. Now we have to look at all the other issues and see if the Prime Minister is actually acting within the law.
Gina Miller, very good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, there's a lot of things going on in this country then. Just thinking. Well, it should be on the next one, yeah.
Well, let's have a look at what what's in the Sunday papers for you then? Joining me, Austin Williams, Director of the International Development think tank, the Future Cities Project, who's also the author of China's Urban Revolution, and birthday girl, Sophia Gaston, Director of the British Foreign Policy Group. Morning to you both, and very happy birthday to you, Sophia. Thank you for being here. Let's kick off with the front of the Times, should we? Looking at the no-deal possibility.
Well, I think this is quite extraordinary. The Sunday Times here has got hold of a very sensitive document that's been prepared in Whitehall that sets out not the worst case scenarios under no deal, but what are the likely scenarios. I think it's important, first of all, to note that this is not something that the government has willingly made public. This is something that's been leaked to the Sunday Times. But it's a pretty distressing picture. And it is one of those moments when you're reading this where you think, gosh, I have to take a step back and think about how much politics has changed in the past 5 years. I mean, it's absolutely unimaginable to think back 5-10 years ago to imagine the Conservative Party, the party that really states its claim as the party of economic competence and security and stability, potentially leading the country into such a situation. It's really extraordinary.
If it proves to be true, and the government has responded to this, haven't they, and said, well, we don't expect any of this to happen. We just have to plan around it.
Well, it's preparation plans, isn't it? That's the thing. I mean, for me, one of the key shocks is the fact that this apparently was called an official stroke sensitive document requiring security clearance on a need-to-know basis. In other words, what we used to call top secret.
Yeah.
And somebody in Whitehall has leaked this. I mean, for me, that's partly the bigger story. Carol Cadwallader, they get her on the phone now. But I do think that what they're trying to do with this is the preparation plans for Brexit. So they are trying to say there may be problems. They're saying there will be maybe 3 or 4 hour delays at Eurostar. I was on Eurostar last week. We had a 1 hour delay anyway. But they are preparing for disruption. I think everybody knew that there would be disruption. You can't just leave the European Union kind of the next day kind of all smiles. So having that preparation in place, I think, is actually a good sign. The fact that it may, and they call it Operation Chaos on the front of the Sunday Times, is a little bit of spin.
The normalization of this idea of us crashing out without a deal is really extraordinary. I mean, if you think about where we were during the referendum, in the immediate aftermath, there certainly was no conversation about that. And I think Theresa May actually there's a lot of responsibility for this owed to her as well, because she was the one that started that conversation saying no deal is better than a bad deal and so on. And here we are. I mean, when I read through this, I am very alarmed at the potential for social unrest here. And also, I think there's some really concerning stuff in here about the disproportionate impacts that this would have on some of the poorest members of our society, and things like food, fuel, really essential services, medicine. I think this is quite an alarming picture, and I think that it's very good that the government is planning for all eventualities, but if this is the reality, I think the public needs to know.
Can we have a quick look at the Mail on Sunday, just because it's looking at the Prime Minister and the saboteurs that he's savaging, apparently, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I find it peculiar that there's, again, like on the previous article, there was more of a concentration on the content rather than the fact that it was a leak. In the same way, I think there's more concentration on the words that we use these days, maybe, than the content. For me, saboteur, these are people who are sabotaging Brexit. So I think it's a very appropriate word, very European, French word, obviously. But I think that what the Mail is talking about is Johnson kicking back against this, which I think is something which has been sadly lacking from the Tory party for the last 3 years, and now that he's got within 5 weeks to go, actually having to kind of plan for it. So he's singling out Philip Hammond, who has obviously previously been exposed as the Chancellor going to the Electoral Commission trying to block Brexit and start a second referendum. And he says it's as plain as a pikestaff that Mr. Hammond was undermining the UK. And it's very appropriate given that it's the anniversary of Peterloo that he uses these terms. This is people trying to deny a democratic vote.
I grew up with that phrase being used. That's what you get up north. Look, can we have a look as well? It's still in the Mail on Sunday. Jihadi Jack, Austin, because this is again, I mean, this is something which apparently happened some time ago. We're only just hearing that this young man, Jack Letts, has had his British citizenship stripped away.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the world seems to be full of unanswerable political questions these days, so I don't really know what the resolution to this is. I don't have any sympathy for him whatsoever.
Just getting some water, guys. I'll be back in a minute.
Times he's been on TV,
And we can
and
keep filming what we're going to be filming.
He joined...
Yeah, I'm good. All right. Sorry about that, guys. I had to get myself a can of Popsy, can of Iron Brew. So we're going to continue talking about the news and showing the news channel. So there we go. Let's go. Continue.
You know, a nihilistic, anti-Western, anti-civilizational values cult in the Middle East, and he's had his citizenship withdrawn by the UK on the basis that he has dual citizenship with Canada. Now, the interesting thing, I suppose, is the fact that Canada, apparently, Mr. Trudeau, everyone's liberal friend, is now saying that by doing that, how dare you? You now made him our responsibility, our problem, that maybe they will now seek to leverage the trade deals that Britain seeks to do with Canada after Brexit as a way of getting back at us. So how dare you interfere and pushing onto us, we're now going to make you pay.
I suppose we are in a pretty precarious situation when dealing with our international friends, aren't we? Talking of precarious situations, in the Observer, Sophia, they're looking at the situation in Hong Kong at the moment.
Well, I think, firstly, there's been a lot of conversations recently about people losing faith in democracy and so on. So as someone who really does believe that liberal democracy is something that we should be championing around the world, there is something very heartening in these protests. And I think we should look at this as something very bolstering to the idea that there are people on the other side of the world saying, This is what we want. We don't want an authoritarian future. We want freedom and liberal democracy, and they're really willing to put themselves on the line to achieve that.
There is our correspondent out there, Stuart Ramsey, was saying the other day.
Tensions in Hong Kong, guys, still.
Is that raises the
you people don't know about it.
Losing the moral high ground when they start tying people up and attacking them.
Yes, of course. Peaceful protest is always what we should be hoping to achieve here. But I do think that some of the great struggles in history really have often come through much more difficult action and a sense of conflict. So we need to appreciate that when people are fighting for their freedom and their lives are on the line, that it may go in this direction. I think for Britain, it's a really interesting question for us. We haven't been incredibly involved in the Asia-Pacific region, certainly since the withdrawal 20 years ago. But these are the questions now, particularly after Brexit, that we're going to have to start weighing into.
Look, we are sadly out of time, I'm sorry to say. Sophia, Austin, very good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Interesting news, eh? Right, so we're going to go for, let's see, or look on this one, I think.
CBIC's smash hit Independence Day offer is back. Buy 3 plots and get 1 free at our flagship development, China Park Golf Estates, Gawada's first GD-approved luxury golf community. Special 50-month payment plan from as low as £139 per month with 200%
Talking about
plus
golf
anticipated
courses and houses, I think.
2023. CBIC Global are leading the way in building Gawada as the first developer to complete infrastructure works and hand over plots to our valued buyers. We have created over 500 jobs in Pakistan, giving families livelihood whilst we build Pakistan. Join hands with us this Independence Month and together let's build Pakistan. Invest securely and enjoy great returns with CBIC Global, the market leader for property in Pakistan. Call us now on 0333 733 337 or visit cbicglobal.com.
The Prime Minister will deliver a stark message to EU leaders when he makes his first trip abroad as Prime Minister this week. He'll tell Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron and others that they need to strike a new deal or the UK will leave on the 31st of October without an agreement. Meanwhile, more than 100 MPs from all sides of the House have urged the Prime Minister to recall Parliament, warning the country is on the brink of an economic crisis. Well, former Brexit Minister, now Energy Minister, Kwasi Kwarteng is here. Very good to see you, Minister. The Prime Minister is effectively saying no deal is unstoppable if we want that to happen. Isn't he? Is that actually the case?
What he's saying is that we're going to leave with or without a deal on the 31st of October. And the reason he's saying that is that this has gone on too long.
Yep, I agree. It has gone on too long.
Theresa May's government that no deal was better than a bad deal. And I heard her say that, as many people did.
No, I don't know.
Hundreds of times. And we've got to deliver on that, one way or the other.
Does that, well,
31st of October, and that's what the government's focused on.
But the Prime Minister's gone from saying it was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance that we wouldn't get a deal to now being, perhaps some would say, a little bit more realistic about it. It is looking unlikely, isn't it? The EU don't seem to want to be playing ball here.
Well, these things can change very quickly, and we've always said that our first aim, our preferred outcome, is for a deal. But if we don't get a deal, we have to be prepared to leave without one. And that's very clear. That was always been the policy of the government, even 2 or 3 years ago, when this whole process started. We wanted to get a deal, but we should have been prepared to leave without one.
But if we do leave without one, according to Operation Yellowhammer, hard border in Northern Ireland, shortages of food, fuel and medicines, that does sound pretty bad, you've got to be honest.
I think there's a lot of scaremongering around, and a lot of people are playing into Project Fear and all the rest of it. We've got to prepare for no deal. In fact, the previous Prime Minister created DEXU, and she said that the mandate of DEXU last summer, was to prepare for no deal. I was working in that department. That's what we were focused on. Now we've got a new Prime Minister who is very much focused on that, and the scale and intensity of those preparations are increasing, and we will be fully prepared to leave without a deal on the 31st of October.
It's a case of how you leave without a deal, isn't it? MPs are trying to, certainly some MPs, I should say, are trying to stop it. Gina Miller has said for her response to her legal challenge is that proroguing Parliament, she says now it cannot happen. The government has specified to her in that letter that's not an option.
No, we're not talking about proroguing Parliament. I mean, what people are doing, what their schemes, their hatching and plots, I don't know about that. What I do know is that the Parliament voted overwhelmingly for the referendum. The Parliament voted pretty overwhelmingly to trigger Article 50. The Article 50 process is coming to an end. The 31st of October wasn't our date. It was the EU who set that date, and we're very committed to leave by that date, and that seems perfectly logical to me.
If the only option is to call a general election prior, to the campaigning is happening before the 31st, the election on the 1st of November, or whatever day that would be, is that an option that actually could be pursued? Is it something you would support?
I don't think anyone is talking about calling an election. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about things like a government of national unity and all the rest of it. I don't see that as a way forward. In order to have a general election, lots of things have to happen, which I think, in my opinion, are unlikely to happen. But we'll have to wait and see. But the main focus of this government is to deliver the referendum and to leave on the 31st of October.
If Parliament, when it comes back, there's a vote of no confidence in Boris Johnson and he loses, there is some speculation out there that he may not accept that vote. He may carry on. Is that a possibility?
Well, there are lots of ifs in this situation. I mean, for a start, it's not clear to me that they will have a vote of no confidence. Maybe they will. And certainly if that happens, I don't think necessarily the government is going to lose that. So there are lots of ifs and hypotheticals here. And I'm sure that the Prime Minister will observe the letter of the law.
What about plenty of your colleagues, 100 MPs from all sides of the House? It's a substantial number have said, Parliament, because of what is going on, Parliament needs to be recalled now and to stay in place until Brexit or that date has been changed or got out or whatever it may be. Isn't that a sensible idea?
Well, we voted on the recess. That was passed. It was a normal vote. And also, I think that there'll be ample scope when Parliament returns in September. As you suggested, there'll be lots of debate. There could well be a vote of no confidence, as you've said. I don't know. But there'll be plenty of scope to debate these issues fully when Parliament resumes in September.
Look, can we move on to one or two other issues which are very much in our minds at the moment? I want to start with PC Andrew Harper because of that tragedy this week. And I think that has really, the public are very much in shock as to losing a police officer whilst on duty. The Home Secretary talking about properly introducing a police covenant now. That needs to be done, doesn't it, in real terms?
I think the circumstances of Andrew Harper's death were appalling. And obviously people in the public more widely are really worried about the nature of crime, the nature of total disregard for police officers and other people. And I think the Home Secretary's got the right approach. I think we have to look at protecting our policemen and women who are at the front line. And I think the police covenant is a very good idea. I think we've got a strong Home Secretary who will always be on the side of the victims as opposed to the criminals.
There is, of course, this discussion, around the extra 20,000 officers and extra investment in the police. It's been welcomed on one hand, but there are plenty of people who've said it's not really the right investment in the right way when you look at different levels of crime and different types of crime in 2019. Does there need to be significantly more investment than what we're seeing in terms of 20,000 here?
Look, I think 20,000 is a start. Whenever government announces spending commitments, people always say it's not enough or it's not deployed in the right way. I think 20,000 extra police officers is exactly the right way to begin to try and reassure the public and make the public more safe so that they feel more safe. That's the important thing. And I think that, there are other ways of policing. There are things like cybercrime and other issues. But we've invested in those as well. We've got some of the best cybersecurity in the world.
But in making the public feel more safe is one thing. You also need to have a level of respect for authority, respect for the police, which seems to be lacking at the moment. How do you start to rebuild that?
Well, you're quite right. This is a cultural issue. In terms of levels of respect for police officers, that's something which we have to reverse in terms of decline. But it's not something that can be done overnight. I think we've seen over the last 10, 20 years, people being less respectful, not just the policemen, just out and around, where people are saying that we are in a more violent and disrespectful age. There's a lot of debate about social causes of crime. And I think we should absolutely support the police. It'll take a while to get back to the levels of deference that we saw in the past. But we can start now, and I think reassuring the public that 20,000 police officers is a good place to start.
And in trying to make our streets safer, obviously, there is this knife crime. There's some people calling it an epidemic. I don't know whether that is a fair use of the term or not, but it's certainly very, very problematic in London and other parts of the country now. The Home Office launched this chicken shop box campaign. It's been criticised for being, amongst other things, borderline racist. Looking back now, do you have concerns about that campaign?
Not really. I mean, the important thing is that people are dying, people are getting killed. And the one responsibility the government has is to make sure that that goes down and is dealt with rapidly. Now, if the best way to communicate the message is the way that you described on chicken boxes or what have you in restaurants, then we've got to pursue that. And this policy didn't come out of the blue. It's been road tested. There were surveys done in terms of how young people, I think it's in between 10-year-olds and 21-year-olds, how young people absorb messages. And this was felt to be an effective way to get the message across. And if that is so, then we should do that.
Yeah, it's just that there are people looking at this and saying, well, you're making assumptions about
Sure.
particularly young black men,
But I don't
where
think
they're going and what they're doing.
I don't think these were assumptions. I mean, there was actual empirical evidence to suggest that this was a good way of reaching people who are affected by knife crime. And at the end of the day, it's those 10 to 21-year-olds who are adversely, disproportionately affected by these appalling crimes.
Okay, Minister, very good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, goes to show, doesn't it, that the world can be a bit crazy sometimes. You know? Like I say, guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, share these videos with your friends, and I'll catch you all in the next stream. Thank you for joining this one. Peace. See you later, guys. Peace.